Just a heads up, today's episode doesn't get into anything graphic, but should be said that we do discuss some mature themes.
No burping on mic.
Wouldn't dream of it.
Welcome to another episode of The Book, or is it The Comic Book Isn't Necessarily Better, with your hosts from the Community Library Network. I'm Mikayla.
I'm Roxanne. And we have a very special guest here again today. John Fischer. You may remember his work from our Jurassic Park episode. And once again, we spared no expense. Literally, because you used your Delta Fly Miles
exactly,
to come out here for free. So good for you, girl.
Yeah.
He's here again, and we're talking about something very near and dear to your heart. So much so that you literally have put it permanently on your arm.
That's correct.
What are we talking about today?
We are talking about The Last Son of Krypton, Superman, which is, in fact, inked permanently onto my upper right arm.
So, the reason we're talking about Superman and not Dune, because if one more person asked me if we're going to do that, the reason we're doing it is because I think you're probably a subject matter expert on this.
Yes, I can comfortably say I know my way around Superman.
Great. So before we begin, tell us why. Why do you have a Superman tattoo?
Yeah, so definitely it's Superman has been kind of a constant in my life. My mom was a comic book reader when she was a kid, and she introduced me to comic books and to superheroes when I was a little kid, and Superman was just the one that, for whatever reason, just always kind of stuck with me and resonated with me. I think just as a, not just like a pop culture figure, but sort of a paragon and this ideal of like human behavior. It's this very sort of optimistic outlook on what a person can be. I kind of like Superman for the same reason I love Star Trek.
Why is that?
It's a way to show humans being their best.
Although Superman is not human.
He's not human, exactly, and we'll get into that.
Oh, just I think. Okay, but why Superman and not Captain America? Is it just because it was your childhood and then...
Yeah, I mean, I think that's largely kind of a circumstantial thing, but that being said, I think with Superman, even more so than Captain America, there's this kind of unwavering purity to the character. There's not really the same sort of ethical or moral gray areas you find with other superheroes. And I'm not to say I don't like that. I think it can make a character extremely interesting, a character more like Batman, for instance. But I think there's something special about a character that, in a way, his best superpower is he always knows how to do the right thing.
I would say that until recent iterations.
Yeah.
But I'll save that for
100%.
later.
Yeah, and things have become a little different in the 2000s, we'll say.
I don't know how I feel about Superman.
Sure.
I respect that he's very important to you, but I've always had the feeling about Superman, and Mikayla, I'd love to know how you feel about Superman, is that I always found him kind of boring because he's so perfect.
Right.
I like superheroes like Batman who does not have superpowers.
Sure, yeah.
So it's his ingenuity and millions of dollars. But
There's that.
I always like the very human, flawed superheroes because I don't know, so that's more interesting to me rather than like he can do literally everything except be around some rocks. So I want to kind of tease that out today, like why that's so like compelling to you and why I'm like, How do you feel about Superman, Mikayla?
This is the first time I've read any of the comics or graphic novels or anything having to do with Superman.
Yeah.
It was just this week for this podcast.
Sure.
So it's not something I grew up with. And I feel about Superman like I feel about Nancy Drew, where I love Nancy Drew, but she is the most vanilla, boring, you know what I mean? Like, she doesn't have any character flaws. She always knows the right thing to do all the time. There's not usually any stakes to her. I like the history behind Nancy Drew more than I like Nancy Drew as a character. And I kind of feel the same way about Superman, where I think that a lot of the history behind him is more interesting maybe than the character himself.
Absolutely.
But I can see where if you had grown up with that,
Right.
the character would be very important to you.
Right. Well, and that being said also, I think, in my mind, I don't necessarily define the character or my enjoyment thereof by a lot of people tend to categorize superheroes by like what their capabilities are and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
In my mind, I like the role that Superman plays in the context of the comics.
Oh, okay.
So if for those of you who don't know, there's the Justice League of America in DC Comics, and that's when all of their superheroes team up, kind of like the Avengers in Marvel. And in that context, Superman is sort of the de facto leader, but moreover, he's the unwavering moral compass of the group. And I think that, to me, like, I appreciate that sort of element of the character. He's sort of considered, like, the elder statesman in the comic book universe of DC.
So he pretty much is and I know he's the OG.
Yeah.
He came first, but Captain America in Marvel is to Superman in Justice League.
Yeah, pretty much. That'd be a good analogy.
Can you give just, like, a super brief Superman origin story?
There was a planet in outer space called Krypton that was many thousands and thousands of years more technologically advanced than Earth. And their most brilliant scientist, a man named Jor-El, discovers that the planet is on the verge of falling apart, literally, and that it will kill the entire population. So in their hubris, the Kryptonians refuse to heed his warnings, so out of desperation, him and his wife send their infant son, Kal-El, in a special little rocket ship, blasting into space at the closest planet that they find would support his life, which is Earth. And so this little alien baby crash lands on Earth, and he's found by a kindly farm couple in central Kansas, the Kents, who, not really knowing what he is, raise him as their own son. And then it turns out that the specific radiation of our yellow sun and the weaker comparative gravity of Earth allows his alien biology to give him extreme superpowers.
Obviously.
Yeah.
Roxanne, I love your face right now.
What? What face am I making?
It's the so skeptical, like, nobody can enjoy this ever possibly.
It's my Game of Thrones face.
It is, yeah.
So then basically, they encourage him as he grows up and starts to manifest all these incredible powers to kind of keep them secret. So he adopts this alter ego, which is Clark Kent, and he becomes a reporter so that he can suss out where help is needed around the world with his reporting resources. And then when trouble arises, he changes clothes and bearing and demeanor and becomes Superman and saves the world.
And what are his specific superpowers? And do they change from
iteration
to iteration?
They have absolutely changed over time. They've changed depending on who's writing it. They've changed kind of depending on the time period it's written in. But generally speaking...
what's canonical?
What's canonical? That's a great way to put it. He is invulnerable to most forms of damage, up to and including nuclear bombs. He has super strength, which allows him to sometimes literally move mountains.
Or turn the world backwards.
More on that later.
I don't even want to start.
No. There's more on that. That's a common misconception in that movie. He can move. Well, you know what? Actually, maybe a more succinct way to put it. I'll use the old tagline from the Max Fleischer cartoons: "Faster than a speeding bullet, more powerful than a locomotive, able to leap tall buildings in a single bound." Later on, as the comics progressed, that progressed to full-fledged flight. He's also able to shoot energy beams out of his eyes.
Tight.
Yeah, and he can freeze things with his super breath and see through objects with his eyes.
So essentially, it sounds like all other superheroes that have been created and supervillains have just been stolen from.
They have fractions of his powers. Yeah, pretty
There have been
much.
a lot of lawsuits.
There have been a
which
lot
I
of
found
lawsuits. Yes.
Very fascinating.
Yes.
I didn't know about the ice breath.
Yeah, it's because his lungs can super compress air, and then when it decompresses, it's cold. So.
I love that you have the exact reason why
Yeah.
like...
No, I have like biology books about this.
Okay.
Yeah.
Duh, Roxanne.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, actually, it is great that you do have horn rim glasses. That,
Exactly. It's fitting.
so you push them up before you say, well, actually. Okay, great. Thanks.
Yeah.
So, and then he has a love interest.
Yeah, Lois Lane, the sassy, capable, pugnacious. Sometimes. Generally speaking, Lois Lane nowadays is seen as this very extremely self-sufficient woman. For a long time in the comics and in the movies, she was kind of the damsel in distress. But she's his co-reporter at the Daily Planet, where he works in Metropolis.
Okay, and then just one more question. Who is his biggest foe?
Usually it's considered to be Lex Luthor. Yeah, who initially started as like a kind of a kooky mad scientist making like ray guns and stuff. Then he progressed to more of a super villain where he had like evil underground layers and stuff like that. And then in the 80s, he actually became a
Jeff Bezos.
Jeff Bezos, yeah. He became this like business mogul that used his extreme wealth to try to do evil stuff sort of above board.
He thinks he could save the world if Superman wasn't around. Is that kind of
That's the way that some people have written him, is that Lex Luthor views Superman as like the antithesis of what humanity actually needs. He thinks that Superman has become like a crutch that prevents people from actually progressing and solving their own problems.
Oh, so that's way more interesting to me than just normal Superman.
Yeah.
So is this like Jeff Bezos versus Elon Musk?
That's a great way to put it.
Maybe.
Yeah. Yeah. There's actually, if you're more interested in that character, there's a really cool book called Lex Luthor, Man of Steel, and it's the whole story written from his perspective. Where the only times you see Superman, he's this figure like floating above Metropolis with glowing red eyes, like watching everyone.
Ooh, weird.
And Lex Luthor views himself as like the human underdog who's trying to show everyone that this creepy alien shouldn't be telling us what's right and wrong.
Oh, that's so 1984.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah,
I was just about to say it's like Big Brother.
Yeah, very much. Yeah.
Oh,
okay.
Yeah, so there's some interesting takes that people, and I think that came out in the last like 10 years. It's a pretty recent one.
Okay, cool. So, Roxanne.
Yeah.
We have a newly dubbed section of the podcast called Roxanne's Context Corner.
Sure is.
Would you like to provide context?
I live for this. So instead of me just going on my normal history rant, now we're labeling it. Slapping a label on it.
Great.
I just want to give a super quick history about where comics come from. And I know we've done a graphic novel before, of course, Persepolis. But that was a really one source to like a 1-to-1 ratio. This is a little bit of a different format than we normally do, but we think it still fits into the parameters of what we normally talk about. Also, it's our show, so you know. But we want to talk about how Superman has been portrayed from his beginnings, and then through the years, and then how it also has been portrayed on the page versus the screen. But really, just quickly, like, how did we get to Superman? Mm-hmm. So, we obviously have been having cartoons since cave paintings. Yes, I went that far back. So, Mikayla, I thought I remembered what cartoon was off the top of my head, but I don't. I just remember that it has an interesting entomology?
Yeah.
Etymology.
Is entomology bugs?
Yes, it is.
Yes.
So does that okay, anyway. What? How do we get, like, what's a cartoon, technically?
So a cartoon, and I don't know this off the top of my head, I did have to look this up, comes from the French carton or Italian carton, which means strong, heavy paper or pasteboard. So it's a drawing on strong paper or preliminary sketches made by artists on heavy paper.
Cool. And that's where we get the term cartoon. Before we had widespread newspapers coming out, people would get their political beliefs out by putting out what they call pamphlets.
Right,
Broadsheets.
Broadsheets where they like might paste them up around town, or they'd hand them out, and they usually would have maybe a vulgar political cartoon, like if you've heard about like the Marie Antoinette ones. It was a way for the masses to like pick at the hierarchy that they were under. Especially in England, they would have really insulting cartoons about aristocrats. Then they had like Punch magazine, which is a political magazine, had really famous political cartoons. So if you weren't really literate, you could at least look at political cartoons and get an idea of what was going on.
Sure.
Okay.
So it became really popular in Punch in England, and then, of course, during the Revolutionary War, it became really popular as a way of like fighting back at England.
Sort of like propaganda.
Absolutely. Yeah. So the first American cartoon was from Benjamin Franklin, and it was in 1754, and you might have actually seen this one before. It says join or die, and it's a snake that's chopped into 13 colonies. Or 13 pieces, and they're all labeled a different colony. And so he is credited with the first American cartoon.
Sure.
Going into the 1800s, Germany was really famous for their popular comic books, like actual graphic novels.
Sure.
And then back in America in the 1890s, during the yellow journalism era, where it was Hearst versus Pulitzer. If you've seen Newsies, you'll learn all about it.
Sure.
It was who could sell the most papers. And so they would illustrate their stories with these like really dynamic cartoons. And then they also started including comic strips. So the first comic strips included old chestnuts such as the Yellow Kid, the Katzenjammer Kids. Gasoline Alley, Little Orphan Annie, and Popeye,
Yep.
which could be said as a precursor to Superman.
Absolutely.
Along with Tarzan
Yep.
is a big influence,
Yep.
sort of the adventure novels geared towards young readers in the 1800s.
Yeah.
Were a huge influence on Superman.
Absolutely.
But by the 1930s, almost every single newspaper had a full-color Sunday Funnies comic page.
Mm-hmm.
And it became really popular. That was Roxanne's Context Corner.
Yeah.
Roxanne's Context Corner. Oh. And so, 1930s, we have the first appearance of Superman. And where did he come from?
A little bit of backstory on that. Superman was created by two young guys in Cincinnati.
Young Guns.
Young Guns. Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster, both the sons of Jewish immigrant families that basically fled persecution in Eastern Europe. And he initially started in 1932 as a short story written by Siegel and illustrated by Shuster called The Rise of the Superman, and it was hyphenated. And he was actually a villain in that story. So that story was about a guy down on his luck who gets imbued through like a science experiment with telepathy and becomes this person who tries to take over the world by causing wars and manipulating the stock market and stuff, and then his powers go away and he gets reduced back to a human again.
It reminded me a lot of Flowers for Algernon.
I was just about to say that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Where he like gets all the good things and then it all disappears.
Yep, exactly.
Or that Simpsons episode.
Yeah, exactly. And so these two guys worked together, and they, after kind of workshopping this kernel of an idea they had,
Starting in high school, right?
Starting in high school, yeah. They were like 16 when they started doing this. And to provide some more context, these were both two sort of what the word in Yiddish is nebbish. A nebbish is a person who, upon leaving the room, makes it feel as if someone else had entered. They're both kind of these bookish, nerdy, young, scrawny kids. And they grew up in a Jewish neighborhood in their hometown. It's Cleveland, not Cincinnati. And they started working on the idea of an adventure novel and a story inspired by, like you mentioned, Tarzan, John Carter of Mars, Doc Savage. There were kind of these archetypes out there already of these heroes with fantastical abilities and secret hideouts and dual identities and stuff. And so they created the idea for Superman, and they had to pitch it all over town. It took them 6 years to finally actually get a publisher for it. But then Harry Donenfeld and Jack Leibowitz, the heads of Detective Comics, aka DC,
I just learned that yesterday.
Yeah. Finally picked it up in 1938, and it was published in the spring, and immediately became America's most popular comic within days of its release. It absolutely took the nation by storm.
One thing I want to add, we all kind of looked at a book called Superman, The High-Flying History of America's Most Enduring Hero when doing research for this. And one of the things that is talked about in there is the fact that Jerry Siegel actually dropped Joe Shuster for a while. Mm-hmm. They were so young and trying to get this out that they thought that their youth was actually holding them back from getting Superman serialized.
Yep.
And so Jerry Siegel was kind of like, bye, Joe, and started to try and get more known cartoonists on board to draw Superman, and then couldn't. And then he was like, hey, Joe, come back.
Yep.
Which is kind of a crazy thing for them to bounce back from.
Right, exactly.
And that never happens.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And then they worked together for another, 20 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For a long, long time.
Yeah. They also created two characters that have great names. Dr. Occult.
Yep, Dr. Occult.
Sounds like early Doc Ock.
Yeah.
And then... It's my favorite, Slam Bradley.
Slam Bradley, yep.
That's an excellent name.
Yeah, Slam Bradley. His signature move was getting into fights where he would grab a person by the ankles and swing them around like a battering ram.
What?
Yeah, and so there's all these pictures of Slam Bradley twirling, holding some guy and knocking over like a bar full of goons.
Oh, that's excellent.
Yeah.
I am now obsessed with Slam Bradley.
Slam Bradley,
I want all of the merchandise.
I would like a Slam Bradley tattoo.
Right,
yeah.
And Slam Bradley looked identical to Superman too. But just with like a button-up shirt and pants on.
So he's Superman's cousin from Milwaukee.
Yeah, exactly.
Hey guys,
Yep.
watch out or I'm gonna bash ya.
And another quick cool thing from the book that you were just talking about, Mikayla, that I really appreciated learning, Harry Donenfeld, who wound up being one of the kind of the head guys at DC, prior to getting into the burgeoning comic book business, had mostly been doing super trashy pulp novels. So I wrote down my favorites. He had a series. It was Spicy Western, Spicy Detective, Spicy Adventures, and Spicy Mysteries.
Spicy queso Texas.
Those were his like best-selling properties up to that point.
How did that not just turn into the Harlequin romance series?
Right, yeah. And it was interesting because, basically Harry and Jack at DC had kind of their fingers in a lot of pies, just trying to make money wherever they could. And essentially when Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster came with this Superman idea, they're like, let's try it. We'll see if it makes a buck. Not knowing that it would be this, like, genre-defining piece of intellectual property.
Well, I'm sorry, I'm really stuck on pies. Fingers and pies. I've never heard that. You certainly can turn a phrase.
Yeah.
It's a real folksy saying, as my husband would say.
Mm-hmm.
I do want to talk a little bit more about the intellectual property because this is super fascinating.
Yeah, definitely.
So DC in later years maintained that Joe and Jerry actually signed away the rights to Superman when they bought it for Action Comics #1.
Yeah, for $412 was how much they were paid for the rights to Superman.
But it wasn't even really the rights to Superman as such, right? They were just making Action Comics #1. So later on, there's this big lawsuit where Joe and Jerry say they didn't give away the rights to that. Also, Jerry went away to World War II, and during that time, DC published Superboy.
Exactly.
Which was an idea that Jerry had but did not give to DC in any way, shape, or form. So he came back. He was like, I want the rights to Superman and Superboy back because I never gave them to you. It was a $94,000 settlement. And this is in the 40s, right?
Yeah,
right?
So that's a tremendous amount of money
huge.
now.
It's millions of dollars now.
Yeah.
Settlements for the rights. DC won, and then they fired Joe and Jerry. And then later they rehired Jerry, but apparently not Joe. And then later they led another lawsuit against DC, again for the rights, and they fired Jerry again.
And Jerry's the writer?
Jerry's the
writer.
Yeah.
Yeah. In 1975, he ended up starting a public campaign for better treatment of comic book writers. Really fascinating.
Yeah.
And Warner Brothers ended up giving both Jerry and Joe a yearly stipend, full medical benefits, and credit on all future Superman productions, in exchange for them not contesting the ownership, ever.
Yeah.
And then there's 50 more lawsuits.
Yeah.
And now both of those guys are dead.
Yeah.
And so all of the comics that I was reading, all of them say created by
Jerry Siegel
and Joe Shuster.
Yeah.
How did it all come out in the wash? Do you think that was successful for them, or were they still it's not enough?
I'm asking. They wound up both being
multi-millionaires.
Yeah, financially successful as a result of Superman.
So
their families are well set up.
Okay. Yeah. I was under the impression it was they got screwed out of this, and then they never got any money from it.
Oh, no.
No. I know there have been, even in as recent as the last 15 years, some ongoing legal disputes, too, with their estates. And that at one point in the early 2000s, suddenly comic book readers noticed that Superman didn't have his red trunks on anymore. And that's because, I believe it was the Siegel estate, very figuratively and literally sued the pants off of him. They claimed that the red trunks with yellow belt was the unique creation of Jerry Siegel, and that they negotiated that DC could only use the character if they removed that part of the costume.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Did you write that down?
I did not. No, that's not.
That's at the top of your head.
Yeah.
I want to high five you so bad right now.
Yeah.
So I think where it sits right now, as far as I can tell, is that Superman is set to enter public domain in 2033.
Sure.
So 12 years from now, but only the character as he's depicted in Action Comics #1.
Interesting.
So any powers he gained later, can't do it. Any costume changes or anything that came later, even some of the characters like Lois Lane, Jimmy Olsen, they're not going to be public domain in 2033. It'll all be later.
Is Lana in the first one?
Oh,
Lana Lang? No, I think she came around later in the 40s when they started explaining Superman's sort of backstory more. That even might have been actually a Superboy thing.
Oh.
Because that's all about him when he was a kid in Smallville. Lana Lang, if you don't know, that was his childhood crush before he met Lois.
Sounds a lot like Lois Lane.
Yeah. And as we learned reading the book here, Lois was the name of Jerry Siegel's childhood crush.
Yeah.
So that kind of migrated into the story.
That's cute.
That was very cute.
Also, I read that later on in his life, I believe it was Jerry and not Joe. I think Jerry said that the name Clark Kent came from Clark Gable and Kent Taylor. And then because his name was Clark, it was Clark and Lois. Yeah. Sort of like Lewis and Clark. So a little nod to some adventurers of old.
Sure.
Oh,
absolutely.
I don't know why it took me a second.
Yeah,
who's that?
Yep.
That's great.
So that's been
cool.
a lot of history.
Love it.
Okay, can we talk about some of the actual novels, comics?
Yeah, 100%. It's hard to kind of frame all of this because there's so many thousands and thousands of comics at this point, and there's been multiple lines of comics published concurrently, all depicting Superman. And they talk about that again in the book, that at a certain point DC was like, we don't really care, it makes more money this way.
Right.
So there, even when you start to talk about a given year of Superman content, there's sometimes conflicting sources depending on which individual property you're reading.
It's kind of nice though, because then it's kind of like choose your own adventure. And you
Pretty
just
much, yeah.
Pick the version of Superman you like the best.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
And that did go on until the 80s. And then there was a rather big, unprecedented event in DC Comics that kind of shifted away from that model. So,
Which was?
the Crisis on Infinite Earths. So this,
Do tell.
yeah, this is kind of an interesting thing in terms of like publication history. So,
It's like, was it just a bunch of nerds naming like a company politics that?
I hope so.
as we talked about, right, there were all these smaller comic companies that started bubbling up when superheroes started getting popular, and then even within DC they had, Action Comics, they had Man of Steel, they had Superman, they had Superboy, they had all these properties happening at the same time that weren't necessarily connected, and if they were connected, they might say one thing this month and then something else this month that contradicted it. There was no continuity or coherence to anything, right? And so in the 80s, basically DC's publishing house got too convoluted and they decided they needed to distill everything down. So in the narrative of the comics, in every single one of their properties, they started alluding to the multiverse. And that actually all of these parallel comic lines were parallel realities. Ooh. And so in an effort to streamline their properties, effectively, they created an event in their comic book universe where the realities started collapsing into each other.
Clever.
So, yeah, and there was this big evil monster called the Anti-Monitor that was trying to, gobble up reality. And so what happens is you actually have the Golden Age Superman meets the Silver Age Superman, and they're like, your costume's different. And then, Superboy exists at the same time, but it's not Superman.
This is string theory, right?
Basically, yeah. And essentially what winds up happening is they kill off every version of every character except for one, and they're now all in the one version of reality that survives the cataclysm.
Oh.
Yeah.
I feel like all the other superhero things that I've consumed lately do the opposite, where they were one reality and then they find out that there's five. The Loki show did that really recently.
Yep, exactly.
WandaVision. Just the Marvel Cinematic Universe in general. But then also, did you guys watch Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse?
Right.
No.
Where
I love that
it's
movie.
Tremendous, yeah.
Oh my gosh, it's so good.
And there's more parallel realities and stuff that can merge together.
It's got Nick Cage as Noir Spider-Man, which is, I love Nick Cage. Undyingly, unfailingly love him. And that movie is great.
So yeah, that's why nowadays there's kind of a more concise and clear and consistent depiction of Superman since the mid-80s.
I wonder what the conversation between the movie that came out in the 70s and was a smash hit, and then having, one Superman. They're like, well, now, because the popular movie has come out, now everyone has, a really solid base.
Right.
Like a mainstream Superman.
Right. Well, that does bring up a point that I wanted to mention, though, Roxanne. It's part of the reason that, you asked me why I love Superman so much. And when you and I first started talking about doing this episode, I asked you, okay, elevator pitch, tell me what you know about Superman. And you, as a person who had never seen a Superman movie...
That's not true. I saw the one with Kate Bosworth.
Yeah. You saw Superman Returns.
That's basically the only Superman movie I've ever seen.
But I did think it was incredible that a person who has consumed almost no Superman media knew the whole origin story of Superman. And you pretty accurately described the whole thing to me, right? And so I think it's almost gotten to the point where it's Star Wars level. It's this thing that's ingrained itself into our culture so much, I think that's kind of incredible in and of itself.
Let's talk about some of our favorites. John, what's your favorite Superman?
The Christopher Reeves movie.
Oh, going back to... Wait, are we still talking about comics?
We're kind of
just media in general.
We're in the multiverse right now.
Yeah.
Okay, so should we just kind of stick in the multiverse?
Let's
talk about some different iterations.
What iteration of Superman, it's the Christopher Reeves movie.
Okay, excellent, because I would like to complain for a very long time about this movie.
100%. I will happily defend it.
So if we're going to do this, I'm going to have to pull up... I was texting John as I was watching the movie. I was like, oh, well, I do notes anyways.
Yeah.
So I was just live
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 sort of,
tweeting it.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I'm going to pull up our text exchange. So it came out in 1978.
Yep.
It's probably the best well-known Superman movie,
Sure.
starring Christopher Reeve.
Yep.
It's got a soundtrack by John Williams that
Yep.
is Academy nominated,
Yep.
but did not win,
Right.
which is crazy.
Right.
It is.
Because, again, I just watched the movie for the first time this week, and I was
Yeah.
like, I know every song
Yeah.
in this score.
Yeah, it's incredible.
Yeah. I didn't realize when I pulled it from the library that there is a director's cut
Yes.
of this movie.
Yep.
It is 2.5 hours long, and
Yep.
at least 1.5 hours of that is too much movie for me.
It was a lot of movie.
It was a lot of movie.
Mm-hmm.
Here's just some of my problems with
Sure,
this movie.
sure.
Just a few of them.
Yeah.
Wait, we need a name for this. Mikayla's
Screen rants. Mikayla's screen rants.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, number 1. His dad dies. He leaves his mom. He's like, Mom, I gotta go. I'll come back and see you later. She disappears from the movie.
Mm-hmm.
He goes, makes his Fortress of Solitude. He's gone for 12 years.
Yeah.
12 years, and he's not in human time.
Mm-hmm.
And then gets back and is like, send a paycheck to my mom. And then his mom never figures in it again. Whereas in all the other Superman that I've watched or read, like his parents are pretty integral figures to his backstory, to even some of his current story.
Are you talking about his Kansas parents or his...
Yeah, Martha Kent is what I'm talking about. So to me it was just so weird that he's like, it's fine, I'll be gone for 12 years, and Marlon Brando, my weird hologram dad, will impart 26 galaxies worth of knowledge to me.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever, fine. There's a little girl who gets a cat stuck in a tree. Okay, girl gets her cat stuck in a tree, and he saves it, and she goes inside to be like, Mom, Superman got my cat out of a tree, and then you just hear...
Yeah. What did I tell you about lying?
Oh my god!
Yeah, that part's messed up.
It's pretty messed up.
Yeah.
The cringiest scene I've ever seen in any movie, ever. This movie would not get made today. It just wouldn't. It absolutely would not. So Lex Luthor and company is like trying to set up this missile thing. His femme fatale, basically dressed up like Marilyn Monroe, goes and faints.
As a distraction for the military guards, yeah. Miss Tessmacher.
This like group of Navy guys is gathered around her. They're like, Captain, she's having trouble breathing. And he's like, well, what do you suggest? And he goes, well, I think we should...
Vigorous chest massage and mouth to mouth.
And mouth to mouth. And then the guy's like, okay, I'll do it. And he's like, no, I wouldn't ask you guys to do anything I wouldn't do. And gets down there and then tells everybody to about face.
Yeah, it's
And then
gross.
assaults her?
Yeah.
Presumably, yeah.
That whole scene, I was just like, no, the whole time. I was
Right.
home alone. My cat left me because I was yelling so loudly at the
Right.
screen. And then just Superman's backward flight would not, in fact, reverse time and would instead lead to catastrophic global weather phenomenon. In this paper, I will. And then I just cut off.
And what are you referring to when you're saying this reverse flight?
So, like...
Should we explain the premise of the movie real briefly?
Is there a premise?
There absolutely is a premise.
Okay, so Mikayla, I found out that this is John's favorite movie ever.
Yeah.
What?
And you've seen it, what, hundreds?
Yeah, probably.
Oh my
It's
god.
my favorite
hundreds?
movie of all time. Yeah. Yeah, probably. Yeah.
Oh, you and I can't be friends. Okay, tell me the premise.
Kind of the first 2/3 of the movie, the first 2 acts are what we talked about earlier, is Superman's origin story. So it shows a very phoning it in Marlon Brando on Krypton.
Who did not memorize his lines.
Yeah, it was rough.
He was basically reading them off cue cards.
That being said, the visuals of Krypton are super cool in that movie, I
I
think.
disagree.
Really? All right, fair.
It's so clearly miniatures. It looks awful. Like, Star Wars was already out, and Star Wars does miniatures real well.
Mm-hmm.
This
I'm
movie
going to
does not.
disagree with you hard on this.
Oh, okay.
Well, so that being said, we'll talk about the interior shots then.
Okay.
So you see the destruction of Krypton, you see the spaceship leaving, and you see Superman getting raised in this sort of very Norman Rockwell-esque, quaint Kansas town, and then leaving... Smallville, yeah, and then making his fortress up in the Arctic, and then it sort of segues into late 70s Metropolis, which is, of course, an analog for New York, and he becomes the intrepid reporter with Lois Lane. And the core conflict of the movie is that there's Lex Luthor, who is this criminal underworld sort of boss, concocts the biggest real estate heist of all time. And that involves him buying up huge tracts of land on the east side of the San Andreas fault line. And his plan is to subvert 2 U.S. military nuclear missiles that are being tested to go into the fault line, trigger a giant earthquake, and basically cleave California off of the continental United States.
Can we talk to a geologist?
The physics are hazy here.
Yeah, that part was unrealistic.
It's pretty silly. It's pretty silly. But effectively, he does that. He pulls it off. One of the missiles hits, and it triggers this colossal earthquake, and everything starts falling apart. The Hoover Dam breaks open, and Superman is zipping back and forth, trying as hard as he can to fix everything and save as many people as possible. But in his efforts, Lois Lane is killed in a rock slide. She's buried alive. And
Isn't she thrown from her car yet there's no broken glass?
No, that's earlier, yeah. Oh. No, she gets, like, buried. It's really creepy. She gets, like, sucked down into a fissure. Oh, yeah. And to me, like, the most heart-wrenching scene in the movie is just Christopher Reeves, like, holding her, saying no because he knew he couldn't save her. Like,
yeah, I definitely did laugh when that happened.
Oh, man. Well, that being said, what happens is Superman does not make the Earth spin backwards.
Okay.
Mikayla. He flies... No, he doesn't. It's
wait. Push your glasses up and say, well, actually.
He flies backwards in time, so it appears that the Earth is spinning backwards because time is reversing. He does not, like, mechanically force the Earth to spin the other way.
I don't get it.
Right. He's going backwards in time, so as an observer, everything would look like it was moving in reverse. Right?
No, I don't get it.
Listen, we live in a 4-dimensional world, and it's portrayed in a 3-dimensional way, and it's garbage.
It's a clunky way to portray it.
So he did turn back time.
Yeah, he goes backwards in time. He goes backwards in time, but he does not make the Earth spin the other way. The Earth just appears to spin the other way because time is reversing.
Everybody goes back in time with him, despite the fact.
No, he's traveling. He's traveling to an earlier point in time by himself.
Okay, so what happens to the 10 minutes that it takes him to go back in time? Is that split off into the multiverse?
It's unclear.
Okay, I mean, it should be, really.
Regardless, he basically does like a take two on his rescue efforts and makes sure Lois survives this time. And then at the very end of the movie, he apprehends Lex Luthor and his henchman Otis and drops him off at a prison. And then, salutes the camera as he flies into space. Oh, yeah, I forgot about that. See, I forgot there was a plot, because there was so much Lois Lane weird flirting that I forgot that anything else happened.
When she's like, I'm fine.
The weird, poem that she has in her head.
Oh my gosh, that was awful.
That part's pretty bizarre, yeah.
And the part, he, flies up to her terrace to, give her an interview. Her first question is, she's a serious reporter, supposedly. Her first question is, are you married? Her second question is, do you have a girlfriend?
Yeah.
And then later on, she asks him what color underwear she's wearing.
Yeah.
And he's like, well, you're standing behind a lead planter, so I can't tell. And 2 questions later, he's like, pink!
Yeah.
Because she moves.
Yeah.
I about died during that scene. I was like, can I go somewhere else?
Wow, if she had, the 3 wishes from a genie, you'd be so wasted on her.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. So anyway, not my favorite movie.
My favorite parts were just how he always says bye.
Yeah.
When he's flying away.
Or so long now.
He'll fly off, he'll be like, bye!
Yeah. I think it's cute. I think it's an endearing movie.
He's a socially conscious Superman.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
He wants people to have positive interactions.
For me, I was really blown away by the score.
Yeah.
And, I mean, the amount of money to do these practical effects.
Yeah. It was an extraordinarily expensive movie. I think the budget was about $55 million at the time in 1978. Wow. It made over $300 million internationally. It was the #1 grossing movie of the year in 1978. So this is the year after Star Wars came out. It beat out Jaws at the movie theater. It beat out all these other...
How?
Yeah, it beat out all these other giant movies. And it broke all sorts of box office records. And adjusted for inflation, it's still the highest grossing superhero movie of all time, I believe.
Really?
I believe I did see
more than Avengers?
Yeah, again, adjusted for inflation.
Well, yeah,
we can check for sure the highest grossing Superman adaptation ever made.
Wow. And okay, so then there are 4 more movies?
There are 4
so
Christopher
what are
Reeves.
those?
Oh boy. So Superman 2 is actually pretty great.
Superman 2, Electric Boogaloo.
Yeah, they filmed Superman 1 and 2 at the same time.
No.
And then they filmed Superman 1 and 2 at the same time. And a different director came in partway close to the end and did a bunch of reshoots, kind of like what happened with Avengers.
And Gone with the Wind.
And Gone with the Wind, yeah. And so
the Batman versus Superman Justice League movies?
Correct, yeah. The Zack Snyder ones, yep. So it's not uncommon.
Release the
So that's why
Snyder
there's a Richard Donner cut of Superman 2. That's where the 3 Kryptonian criminals from the beginning of Superman 1 escape from their Phantom Zone imprisonment and come to Earth with all the same powers that Superman has, and they literally conquer the planet in 4 days. And he has to try to figure out how to beat them. Superman 3 is the one with Richard Pryor in it, actually.
Oh, man.
What?
It's pretty awesome. He plays a computer hacker who... they reference it in the movie Office Space. He develops a computer virus that takes the rounded off decimal points of bank transactions.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And then there's this supercomputer that can turn people into robots. It's very bizarre. And then there's Superman 4, The Quest for Peace, where it's all about him trying to disarm the nuclear stockpiles of the world by pulling them in a giant net and throwing them into the sun. And John Cryer is in it.
Really?
Yeah, he plays Lex Luthor's nephew. And Lex Luthor...
Ducky.
Yeah, and Lex Luthor makes this weird character, I think, named Atom Man, who has, like, golden fingernails, and him and Superman fight on the surface of the moon.
So he's just a goth kid.
Yeah, 3 and 4 are very bad. They're very bad movies. But Superman 1 and 2 are... I think Superman 1's great. Superman 2 is also pretty great. Terrence Stamp plays General Zod, the Kryptonian criminal.
Who's that?
Terrence Stamp. You ever see Priscilla, Queen of the Desert?
No, but I did order it for the Community Library Network.
Yeah.
Check it out.
Hey.
Terrence Stamp is a tremendous actor. Huge repertoire before going into Superman, so he brings a lot of kind of menace and gravitas to that character.
Speaking of sort of Cold War stuff, isn't there's a version called Red Sun?
Yeah. So DC Comics has this whole series of graphic novels they made called Elseworlds. And the idea is, it's sort of like, what if one variable in this superhero's story was different? And so Red Sun is that the young baby Kal-El crashes on a communal farm in Soviet Russia instead of Kansas. And he's raised, and he becomes the premier of the USSR. And then in this version, Batman is a Bolshevik. And Wonder Woman is a political emissary from Themyscira. And Green Lantern is a test pilot in the U.S. Air Force.
Oh man, I thought you said if like one thing was different.
That's it.
Like,
Yeah, it's going
everything falls.
Yeah, and the cover is Superman where he's standing, fists on his hips, but his S symbol has a hammer and sickle in it instead of an S.
What?
Yeah.
Oh man.
I think he kills Joseph Stalin in it and like becomes the leader of the USSR. It's wild.
So is he a communist?
Yeah, he's a communist. A super communist.
Okay. Super communist.
Yeah. There's all sorts of other versions. There's the Shogun of Steel where he crash lands in feudal Japan and becomes a samurai.
Wow.
There's one I was telling Roxanne about called Speeding Bullets where the baby crashes in Gotham City and is adopted by the Wayne family who can't have a child. And then he witnesses his parents being murdered in an alleyway and becomes Batman. But with superpowers.
The superior DC super.
Well,
person.
I'm not. Look,
Just
I love
saying.
Batman too. I have nothing but love for Batman. So
Alright.
there's all sorts of cool, interesting, like thought experiment versions of Superman.
I like stuff like that.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
cool.
for sure.
My brain hurts.
Right.
There's also probably one of the most famous ones. It's called The Nail, and basically it talks about if there was a nail on the gravel road that the Kents were driving their truck on when they were going to go find the baby, and that nail popped their tire, and they didn't find the baby in time. And the baby was found by the government instead of this kindly farm couple.
John,
how
I
it, like-
thought I specifically asked you not to do any mind-altering substances before we recorded today.
These are very famous comics, I'm telling you.
Oh my gosh. At what point do you think this series jumps the shark? Or
Oh.
does it ever?
I mean, look, it's still one of the most valuable comic book properties in the world. I mean, I think if anything, comics are allowed to constantly jump the shark. Probably the biggest jumping the shark was in 1994 when they killed Superman.
Let's talk about that.
Yeah, that was
please.
done. That was done definitely during like a big slump in sales in the comic book industry in general, and it made national news.
Oh my gosh, I remember I spent a lot of time at like used bookstores, comic book stores with my siblings.
Yeah.
I was raised by them.
Right.
I was raised by Barnes & Noble and comic book stores. And I remember like seeing it advertised everywhere that Superman died.
Yeah, absolutely. It was a huge deal.
Wait, how did he die?
There was a good segue, Roxanne. There's a creature that's been kept underground, an alien creature called Doomsday that you find out later.
Multiverse. See, I learned things.
Oh.
Uh-huh.
And Doomsday was actually the product of experimentation and lived on Krypton at one point. But he's this monster whose superpower is that every time he dies, his body regenerates, no longer able to be harmed by what had killed him. So he's reborn over and over again, but gets tougher and more monstrous every time. And so he's this creepy, hulking gray thing with like bone spurs sticking out all over his body and red eyes. And he's borderline mindless, like he's kind of like the Hulk in a way. And so he just beats Superman to death, basically. They have this giant battle. Bashes him in the head. They have this big battle where each of their punches are like shattering windows around them and stuff, and then they both kind of collapse at the same time, dead. And there's this huge funeral for Superman with like a casket with the Superman symbol on it, and every superhero in the world is like filing behind him. It's
even the stupid ones.
Especially the stupid ones.
Oh wait, is Slam
Bradley.
Oh, hey, it's really sad to hear about your Superman on it.
Exactly.
Now, I have to say, you told us that we should read The Death of Superman. That's
yes.
one of the things you told me to prep with.
Yeah.
And so in 2012, they put together a collection of the different episodes of Superman that this came from. So it's called Death of Superman. I loved it.
Yeah, it's great.
The beginning, the first 4 pages of that comic strip are fantastic.
Yeah.
It's just 4 panels on each page of a fist just ramming into a wall.
Yeah.
And every time, the wall dents a little bit more and you see more and more of the bone spurs and stuff on his hand.
Yeah.
And it's all these, big sound effects that just, get bigger and bigger and bigger on the page.
Yeah.
And it starts out, somewhere else, ... Doomsday is coming.
Yeah.
Next page, unrelentingly, Doomsday is coming. Next page, unstoppably, Doomsday is coming.
Yep.
And then the last page, unbelievably, Doomsday is here. I was like, that is the coolest.
Yeah, it's a lot of foreshadowing.
It's so cool.
You paid for the whole seat, but you only needed the edge.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I only wanted the first 4 pages. I could have done without the rest, honestly. But it does end very cool, too.
Yes.
The graphics of the last battle between them, and then Superman laying out on, this...
And Lois Lane, cradling him.
Yes, and, this flag flying in the background and all this, ruined street. It's pretty great.
The panel that really gets me is it cuts back to the Kents on their farm, and Jonathan's holding Martha, who's up, and they're literally watching their son get beat to death on live TV. And they, not only that, but they can't tell anyone that that's actually their son, right? Because they're keeping his secret too, so it's just really sad.
Sorry, I have one question.
Yeah, of course.
Maybe a little off topic.
Yeah.
Does Superman have a social security
They do address
number?
that in one of the comics I read a while back. Yeah, that Martha Kent basically had a cousin in the state government that helped him
How convenient.
They portrayed it to all of their friends as it was a relative had to give up a kid and they adopted it or something like that. There's a bunch of kind of back alley stuff they do.
And in some versions, they actually take him to an orphanage first.
Yeah, originally.
And so theoretically, social services or whatever existed at that time, has some sort of knowledge that he exists.
Yeah.
So
also, I guess social security numbers only came out in the 30s, didn't they?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they're pretty new.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah. So that one, I really
Valid
loved.
question.
Death of Superman.
Yeah.
That was a great one.
Yeah.
I do want to talk about All-Star Superman.
Yeah.
But one of the ones that you didn't recommend that I just found, and I think you've read it too, was called Superman Smashes the Klan.
Yeah. We were talking about this.
Yeah.
So cool. So cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, true story. It was Bud Collyer was the voice of Superman on the radio series that was produced by Robert Maxwell. And Robert Maxwell, this was 1940, I think.
Somewhere around there.
He worked with a journalist who had been investigating the Klan and learning some of their secret code words and stuff. And passed it along to the people programming the Superman radio show. And it was a 12-episode arc called Superman and the Clan of the Fiery Cross, I think, where it's about an Asian-American baseball star who's getting menaced by, they don't name it, but men in white hoods who leave flaming crosses. And they
used all their silly...
Yeah, they used all the silly names. Imperial Wizard and...
Is there a dragon?
There's a dragon.
Grand Dragon. And
so silly.
And they actually used real Klan code words, which apparently sent the actual Klan absolutely foaming at the mouth. And it basically just publicly, completely humiliated what was left of the Ku Klux Klan at that point. And
Good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Pretty awesome.
So Superman Smashes the Klan, so 2021. It's kind of a reboot of that idea of
Did that just come out?
Yeah, it's brand new.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of that same idea of its, I think, the second iteration of the Klan, where they weren't so much focused on African American families anymore. They were really focused on Asian American families, especially right around World War II.
Right.
And
probably on the West Coast.
And mostly on the West Coast, yeah. Mm-hmm. Because there are a lot of Chinese people out there and a lot of Japanese people out there as well. So yeah, but this one's fantastic. It's more graphic novel-y than most of them, the Superman ones, right? It's a lot of text, but it's drawn really cool, and Superman just goes after this Clan of the Fiery Cross, as they're called, and makes them just look imbecilic. So,
yeah, exactly.
But it's got a lot of heart in it. There's Jimmy Olsen, and there's
and
kids
Jimmy
and
Olsen.
Stuff. Jimmy Olsen is a cub reporter. Well,
Superman's pal, Jimmy Olsen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A cub reporter or maybe a photographer. Yeah. He's got different iterations apparently as well.
Yep.
That I can't keep track of. In this, he's a cub reporter who also he's on the kids' baseball team.
Yep.
And the baseball team kind of gets one over on the Klan. It's kind of excellent. So that one I really loved, I have to say.
What's the silliest iteration of Superman? You already talked about some bad movies that they made.
There's some profoundly...
what are ones that just were a big fail?
Well, there were some offshoots that were pretty great, like the Legion of Super Pets. Because Superman has a Kryptonian dog named Krypto, and then Supergirl had Streaky the Wonder Cat and Comet the Super Horse. So there were
Are you making this up?
No, I'm not. You can absolutely look this up, the Legion of Super Pets. They made it into a cartoon recently, like a few years ago, like a TV series. And then there's Ace the Bat Dog. It's Batman's dog.
As my mom, Alma, would say, that's bogus.
It is bogus, but they still made it. So I think in like the 50s and 60s especially, Superman got pretty silly and gimmicky, and they really went for the like little kids market with it. So the version of Superman in Super Friends as well, like the Hanna-Barbera Super Friends, is pretty hokey.
I remember that being pretty bad.
Fun to watch though.
But that also goes back to why you love Superman so much and why you love Christopher Reeve's performance, is because he's earnest. Extremely
earnest. There was a really great interview with, I think, Ilya Salkind, one of the producers, where they said one of the hardest parts of making that movie was casting the lead role of Superman. And they had all of these different actors, some well-known, some not well-known, come in and read for the part. And the test scene was when Superman flies down to Lois Lane's rooftop terrace, like you were talking about for the interview. And all of them had this very sort of affected, sort of silly, over-the-top, heroic, macho voiceover and stuff. And then,
like a transatlantic
accent. Yeah, exactly. It was very silly. And then apparently Christopher Reeves came in and he set down his feet with the wires and he said, "Good evening, Miss Lane." And apparently all the producers kind of turned and looked at each other and kind of were like nodding their heads. And he was a Juilliard-trained actor who I think he actually brought, for better or worse, I think he took the role very seriously. And I think he adds some cool acting choices to the movie.
Bye.
Yeah, bye.
So, better or worse than the Henry Cavill Superman of today?
I thought Henry Cavill did a great job, too. I mean, you touched on this.
You're not going to break him, Mikayla.
Listen. I am Doomsday, and I will ruin this episode.
I think I'm Jimmy Olsen in this episode today.
No, I thought Henry Cavill did a great job too. I do sometimes get a little bored with how they're trying to make every superhero like dark and brooding and edgy nowadays.
I like that. I think you like that too, Roxanne, yeah?
No, I really like Spider-Man is one of my favorites. That was sort of my childhood favorite.
Sure, yeah.
And I don't like Venom. I'm not into dark Spider-Man.
Sure.
Oh, okay. I'm thinking
I like Peter Parker as Spider-Man.
Sure.
Christopher Nolan Batman is kind of like where I live.
Yeah. I mean, that's just... See, I'm more of like a villain kind of girl.
Sure.
Okay, I buy that.
I like my villains.
Yeah.
More than my superheroes.
So my problem with Henry Cavill Superman is not actually really... Okay, it's not. I don't think it's great.
How long has he been playing?
He's in 3 movies now.
Is he the most recent?
Yeah, he's the most recent one. Well, there's technically a TV show that just got canceled about Superman with Tyler Hoechlin, I think is the guy's name. And he's really awesome too. But
yeah. But here's my problem with new Superman.
Okay, give us your TED Talk.
Okay. The movie is bad, first of all. The Batman versus Superman movie is even worse.
I would agree.
I can't believe... I'm going to spoil this for you because I feel like it today, which I don't normally try and do.
Some saltiness.
So Batman and Superman are like duking it out. It's basically like Doomsday. Like one of them's gonna kill the other person, right? Pretty much. And I think Superman's got the upper hand. He's about to smash Batman's face in. Batman goes, "Martha," and Superman's like, "Oh my god, your mom and my mom have the same name. We could have talked this whole thing out with words."
It's really complicated.
Are you serious?
Yeah, that actually happens.
This is like a recent movie that.
Yeah, it came out like 5-6 years ago.
It's a recent plot point.
Yeah, it's pretty
so
contrived.
bad. They're like, "Oh, we could have solved our differences with words instead of fists, you guys." After they've destroyed like 3/4 of the city.
I also don't know how many people, when in a time of duress, refer to their mom by her first name.
Yeah, you just say mom.
Yeah.
And then same problem. Then he's like, "I have a mom named Mom."
Yeah.
That's my mom too. Yeah. Okay. So I have big problems with that. But also I think it's the Justice League movie, when they had to reshoot some things and Henry Cavill was already doing a different movie.
Yeah.
He had, do you know this whole thing about the stubble?
Yeah, he had a mustache because he was doing The Man from U.N.C.L.E. at the time.
That's
and he wasn't or it was either Man from U.N.C.L. or Mission Impossible, he was legally not allowed to shave it. He was under contract. So they had to CGI his mouth, and it looks terrible.
It's so uncanny. It lives in the uncanny valley.
Yes, absolutely.
It's bizarre.
Yeah, it's spooky.
And also the whole thing with the Snyder Cut. I don't even want to go into it, but it's crazy.
I have a quick question that's actually been bothering me the whole time. Why would Superman and Batman be fighting?
So in that movie, in that particular movie...
In general, like, aren't they like, it's classically like who would win in a fight?
Yeah.
Superman versus Batman?
So in that movie, it takes place directly in the aftermath of Man of Steel, where Superman basically levels like a third of Metropolis battling this villain. And a lot of people die as a result. And so Lex Luthor, scheming to get rid of Superman, essentially sort of brainwashes Batman, slowly but surely, into thinking Superman is actually the enemy. And then eventually he kidnaps Martha Kent as a hostage to try to make Superman fight Batman. Basically saying, like, I'll release your mother if you kill Batman.
So this is like me as a kid when my middle brother would poke all of my buttons and all of my younger brother's buttons and then just like vanish into the and my younger brother and I would just punch each other.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
Whoa.
It's exactly the same.
My kid's sneaky.
So it's about Lex Luthor trying to kind of kill two birds with one stone, basically.
I have to say that my favorite so far of all the Supermans that I've seen is actually the cartoons that we were talking about from the 40s.
Yeah.
They're like 8 to 10 minutes long.
Yep.
And just real.
Also Academy Award nominated.
Oh, I didn't know that. Okay.
For best animated short feature.
Cool. They actually got a ton of money to do them.
Yes.
At the time, their earliest episodes got $50,000. Later ones got $30,000.
Whoa.
And this is 8 to 10 minutes long, mind you. Each one of
In
these.
1940.
In 1940. And most of those got, I think it said like $9,000 to like $13,000 was like top.
Yeah.
For anybody making a
So they're
short film.
very big budget.
Yeah, huge. But they're just so nostalgic.
Yeah, they're very cool.
Yeah, they made me think of like Saturday mornings watching cartoons with my grandpa. Obviously, I wasn't watching cartoons from like the 40s. I was watching like the Super Friends on Cartoon Network, but you know.
Well, and I was going to mention the probably the most famous or the most watched version of Superman for people our age, us millennials, was the animated Superman TV series on Warner Brothers in the 90s, written by Paul Dini, who has since done a lot of amazing comics. And that's actually kind of what I grew up with, along with the movie, was those awesome cartoons that were kind of made with Batman at the same time.
Oh, I was going to ask if they were the same creators because they look very similar.
Yep, they were.
90s was a golden age of...
like superhero cartoons.
Yes.
Yeah, incredible.
Yeah.
There was a golden age of comic books as well, and like starting about when Superman was until about 1950. And then a Silver Age as well, which was, I think, about the time he died in the...
So some people say that the Crisis on Infinite Earths that I talked about earlier kind of marks the Silver Age turning into the Bronze Age of comics, which is like 80s, early 90s.
Okay.
And then we have like the modern era of comics.
One last thing. I still feel like I haven't really like needled this out. He is perfect and therefore to me like a little boring.
Okay. You want me to talk on that?
Talk on it.
Yeah.
Why do you like it so much?
So I think when you start talking about Superman being perfect, I think it's important to think about what era of Superman writing you're looking at. I think Superman up until really like kind of recent times absolutely was the perfect indomitable hero.
Boy Scout.
Yeah, Boy Scout, because they just wrote him to be able to beat whatever faced him. I do think that since they put sort of more hard and fast limits on and definitions on what his powers are, that's one thing. But I think what happens with Superman is rather than him being physically challenged, he finds himself in like moral and ethical conundrums a lot. So it's not the same as, say, like Batman fights Bane and Bane breaks his spine because he's way bigger than he is. With Superman, it's like, well, do I re-expand the bottle city of Kandor I keep in my fortress at the cost of destroying a portion of the planet it's sitting on?
I did read that, so don't look at me like that.
Yeah.
I know what he's talking about.
It's like a series of horrible would you rather questions.
Sort of, yeah. And they do write things though that are challenging for him. I mean, it's not as if he just swoops in and easily solves every problem.
I mean, the movie that I watched seems like that's what he does.
Yeah, well, yeah, in the movie he does, yeah. Later on, though, in the subsequent movies, he is very nearly killed. Especially in Superman 2, yeah.
Almost.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think I still need to think about this a
No,
little bit.
100%, yeah.
But I also do want to give a shout out to, what was it, Lois and Clark, the TV show from
With
the
Dean
90s.
Cain and Terry Hatcher.
Yes, that like is definitely like wired in my memory.
It's
of
so good.
It being on in my household, and then Smallville.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I watched every episode.
That was, always on.
Mm-hmm.
And then it had the actress who was in the Colt and Nexium, and she just went to jail.
Yes, Alice
Mack.
Mack. And Fun Connection. Fun Connection. The woman Annette O'Toole, who plays Superman's mom in Smallville, played Lana Lang, Superman's crush, in Superman 3.
That's fun.
Right?
Here's my last movie. It's a movie that never got made, and I'm so bummed.
I know what you're going to say.
Yeah.
Is it Superman meets Nancy Drew?
No, because that would be boring. They'd just be like, I'm smarter than you. No. There was supposed to be a Tim Burton movie.
Starring
Nicolas Cage, my absolute love,
as Superman.
and Christopher Walken. It was written by Kevin Smith,
Yep.
which is insane.
What?
Yep.
And the possible Lois Lanes, it was either going to be Courtney Cox or Sandra Bullock. Can you even imagine a movie where Nick Cage and Sandra Bullock were like the main leads?
Yep.
I love it. It
Yep.
never got made.
Yeah.
But there is a documentary that came out in 2015 called The Death of Superman Lives,
Yep.
which is hilarious.
Yes.
I think.
And they show test footage of Nicolas Cage in a Superman suit with long hair, too.
It's so good.
Didn't he play a superhero in another movie and it was horrible?
Ghost Rider, and it was.
Yes. Yeah, summarily.
It was very bad. He made 2 of them. Yeah.
Here's my argument about him, though. Everything he's ever made is bad. And I love it because it's bad. Have you guys seen Raising Arizona?
Raising Arizona's
That's
great.
wonderful.
God, it's so
That's
Yeah.
not bad.
It's bad.
No.
What?
It's a bad movie, but that's why
Are
it's
you
so good.
serious?
What accent even is that?
I live where the Coen brothers grew up. Take
I
that
was
back.
literally born in Arizona.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
sorry.
that baby is as old as I am now. You don't like Raising Arizona?
No, I love Raising Arizona because it's bad.
It's not bad.
Oh my gosh. Okay. We'll have this some other time. It's bad. All
What?
Nicolas Cage
Yeah, I'm on
acting
your-
is bad.
What about Moonstruck?
Peggy Sue got
Awful.
married.
Oh,
I
so
haven't seen that.
good.
Leaving Las Vegas.
You've seen Moonstruck.
No, I've not seen Moonstruck.
Well then, go watch it and then come
Okay,
back to me with
okay.
this.
We'll have a
You go watch Peggy Sue. You go watch
Cage.
Moonstruck, then
Yeah.
you can come back to me with these outrageous claims.
I will say, to your point, Mikayla,
Yeah.
most of Nicolas Cage's acting is terrible.
Yeah, it's awful.
The
It
vast
has gotten terrible.
Yes, the vast preponderance.
His early stuff is really good when he's very earnest.
Yeah, he's just
Okay.
unhinged.
So here's my recommendations.
Try
I
it out.
only have a couple for this one. I do highly recommend the book that we mentioned earlier that we read through and had some facts
Yeah.
from called Superman by Larry Ty. I also recommend, if you like DC and the world, The Secret History of Wonder Woman by Joe Laporte. It goes,
Yes.
It's
Sure.
real good. It
Sure.
goes really in depth into the creation and the creators of Wonder Woman. They were kind of weird people.
Yes,
so.
very much so.
Very fascinating. And then if you want to get into some actual graphic novels that are more recent, I can't ever not mention Peggy. So Margaret Atwood has an Angel Catbird series, which if you like some of the weirder Superman stories, it kind of reminds me of that, right? Like the mad scientists, and there's like a rat doctor guy. Anyway, it's great. It's weird. Love it. And then also the recent Ms. Marvel series by G. Willow Wilson is fantastic. It takes that Ms. Marvel character and turns her into a Pakistani-American teen superhero.
Cool.
Kamala Khan is incredible.
Yeah.
She's a young Pakistani girl. It's
Yeah.
extremely cool. And it's going to be a movie coming out soon.
Yeah. With a
Sweet.
total unknown person in it,
Yeah,
which is
yeah.
really crazy.
It looks great.
Yeah.
Read more comics.
Read Ms. Marvel.
Read more comics. Comics are great.
Yeah, visit your local comic book store.
Or your local library.
that too.
I've gotten
But
loads
do
of comics
go-
from the library.
Do
Yeah.
go support your local comic book
Yeah,
stores.
absolutely.
Absolutely.
Well, John, thanks for inviting us to your TED Talk today. I learned a lot.
Yeah,
Still not sold on Superman?
Just not my thing.
that's fair. That's fair.
Yeah.
Nobody's
have to
perfect.
say-
I'm a Batman X-Men girl.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I like villains. Poison Ivy forever.
Right, there we go.
There we go. All right, this has been The Comic Book Isn't Necessarily Better. We're still looking for a tagline,
We are.
by the way. We would love to get feedback on our episodes. Please be nice. Our our email address is podcast@communitylibrary.net. We would love to hear from you and tell us where you're from because we're nosy.
We also just want to remind you that anything we've talked about here today is either available at one of our libraries or we will get it for you through interlibrary loan. We're pretty good at tracking stuff down. So.
Find it. All right. Thanks again, John.
Yeah, thank you guys for having me. This was great.
Yeah. Bye. Does Batman have a social security number?
Yeah, presumably.
My husband has a very nice head of hair.
Yeah.
Did I say Batman?
You did say Batman.
No, I'm sure I said
No,
Superman.
you did not.
You said Batman.
The whole thing is so cringy.
Blushing.
Yes.
I thought it was great.
If only we
Rewind
were
the
being
tape.
recorded. Yeah.
I was just pumped that they finally gave Superman some chest hair.